You're in the mix.
SKM presents Strictly for the Music Podcast. You are now live with the #1 podcast for all upcoming artists worldwide.
It's the real deal.
Welcome back, ladies and gentlemen, to another episode. This is Strictly for the Music Podcast. I'm your host, SKN. The next guest I got live in the red is a 27-year-old drummer from Exeter, a small city in the southwest of England. In 2017, he was one of 3 winners of a European contest held by Roland called Be Drums Heroes. In 2018, he began teaching drums in 3 schools that specialize in music in the southwest. And within a year, he had a full timetable of students throughout the week. With no further ado, ladies and gentlemen, let's welcome to Mitch.
Hey guys, hey buddy, how's it going?
Hey man, thank you for coming on the podcast and being able to tell your story and how your journey started in music. So let's get to it, man. Let us know what inspired you to be a drummer.
It's a good question, really. So my dad is a musician. He is a bass player. So really from the time I was born, I was being raised in a very musical environment. And it was around about 2 or 3, I guess, when I really started to remember getting interested in drums. But it's funny, really, because I don't remember a time in my life where drums weren't a focus. So it's an interesting one to have to kind of pin a time on it or a particular point, because there was never any other kind of reality that I remember. My dad, in fact, he told me this when I was a little bit older. He told me that it was kind of his plan to make me a drummer, but I never really realized that. It felt very organic to me, and like I wasn't forced into it at all. I think he kind of maybe had some interesting tricks, in the sense that a lot of his good friends when I was growing up, was they were drummers. He always seemed to hang out with drummers, and I think it was a kind of a little bit of an incentive. And not that he was being friends with drummers intentionally, but that he was kind of like, if we'd ever go over to one of their houses together, he was kind of like, oh, look at that drum kit in the corner, like, you know, I want to go and play on that. And I think that's kind of how I got started, really. So yeah, it's a lifelong thing, and it's never felt like something that I'd actively had to keep up or to work hard to pursue. It's sort of always been there. So yeah, I have my dad to thank for it, really.
All right, man, that's amazing. So tell us about your studio, and what were criteria when setting it up, and how does this environment influence the creative process?
Sure. I don't really have a studio as such. It's just a spare room, which is kind of an office that's used in the house. And it was the beginning of lockdown, really. I kept my kit in there. My Roland electric kit has been kept in there as kind of the place, you know, the music room of the house, which is always where I'd practice. And then when we got to the beginning of the COVID-19 situation, where the country locked down in the end of March in this country, I had to get the electric kit rigged up to my computer. I had to start teaching people online, and it was never really something that I'd found that I had to do before. It was like I probably should have done it a long time ago, and this situation kind of enforced that in a way, which actually made it quite a positive thing for me. So I began really kind of experimenting with how to get my drums to sound the best over Zoom calls to my students. And you know, it's a lot easier to do that in a space in a house when you have an electric kit. One of the biggest problems that we have in the UK is that land is so expensive, and noise pollution, especially if you're a drummer, is a massive issue. I guess it's not as much like that in the States. It can be depending on where you live, but it seems like it's a bit easier. And over here it can be difficult unless you've got a space that you can set an acoustic kit up in, and kind of, it costs money as well. It costs money to rig something up like a studio or any kind of recording setup. Whereas when you have an electric kit, it's a lot easier. So that kind of influenced me to get everything set up as far as being able to use my Roland with the computer was concerned. And then a friend of mine was playing a Roland kit on Facebook, and he uploaded a video of him playing to a track, and his kit sounded amazing, like really, really incredible, the sounds that he was getting out of it. So I asked him what he was using, and he said, I'm using a plugin, which is a plugin that he had open in Logic, and through that he was able to trigger lots of authentic drum samples. And I was really interested, so he said, yeah, it's this company called Slate Audio, and you can get a plugin called Stephen Slate SSD 5.5, which is their drum plugin. It's their MIDI plugin. And once I downloaded that, my drums sounded kind of a lot better than they were before. Like, it sounded pretty good before, but this was kind of taking them to another level. And I realized that through that, it would be a really good time, and kind of gave me a really good opportunity to start recording and getting videos out. And I thought it would be a great time to do something like that. In this situation, it was going to give me a ton of incentive and something productive and positive to do every day if I was uploading videos and recording and posting on Instagram. So it's what I decided to do at the beginning of the pandemic, and it's kind of gone from there. So I like it really, because it's like, I have a nice kit for sure, but with the equipment that I have, it's kind of attainable. It's not astronomically expensive, or nobody really would particularly need things that are out of the question or difficult to obtain to be able to do what I do. I like the fact that anybody with a drum kit and a computer and a camera, I only use my phone for my camera recordings as well, and anybody with that kind of equipment, which is not too difficult to obtain really, would be able to do what I do. And it's kind of taken off, which is nice as well, because it shows that, to me, people aren't really looking for the most impressive setup or whoever has the most expensive gear, and is it's not sort of it's not a contest for who's playing on the best gear or who has the best camera setup or anything like that. I think content hopefully wins in this situation, and it's not even to say that the people who have great setups aren't posting great content either. Of course, it's not what I'm saying. But I like the fact that I think that hopefully people would be inspired if they see what I'm doing with not much gear at all. So yeah, it's a minimalistic setup, but it works for me, and it's not, I would probably do more in time as well. I'll try and add to it, and be more professional in what I do. But considering what I have right now, it's attainable. So I wouldn't call it a studio at all. It's just what I'm doing in my practice room, and it works for me.
All right, man. All right. So, man, you said that you had an electrical drum set.
Sure.
All right. What are the pros and cons of using electric drum set, man?
Sure. So the pros of it, I mean, they're kind of immediate and obvious to begin with, in the sense that the land and the noise pollution issue in England is really prevalent, and they provide the opportunity for someone like myself who would have absolutely no chance of being able to play an acoustic drum kit inside. Otherwise, to have something to be able to practice on. So that's first and foremost, like it's giving me the opportunity to be able to play when I be able to. They're far easier to record, like the recording setup, and having something that's always there. It's always set up. It's always immediate. I can just go down and play it. I got the kit 4.5 years ago, and the novelty of being able to go downstairs and play drums in my own house is just not worn off for me yet, because I didn't have a kit in the house for like 7 years. I think between the time of when I was about 16 to 23. I had no kit in the house. So I'd either have to go down to a studio where I was teaching to play a kit, or just be playing on my laptop just with a pad, and that would be it. That would be all I could do from home. And so that's what I love about the electric kit. The ability to change sounds, of course, from electronic sounds, if that's something that you're inclined to do. Obviously people who are in more kind of electronic sounding genres will use electronic kits, and hybrid setups are becoming a lot more popular these days as well. But I really do love that kit. It's it's awesome. As far as the cons go, playing an electric kit and playing a real kit are never going to be exactly the same. It's getting better. The stuff that Roland offers these days, especially with the VAD, the acoustic design drums, is just absolutely amazing. But to get as close to the real kit as possible, it's different materials, it's different surfaces, all that kind of stuff. Like it's not 100% there. I'm sure it will be very, very close in the future. But what they're offering these days is just second to none. It's amazing. But that would be the only con of it, to be honest with you. Everything else for practicality is a positive.
With more and more musicians creating than ever, and more of these creations being released, what does this mean for you as a drummer in terms of originality?
That's a good question. I think one thing I love about Instagram particularly is that originality sort of comes for me when you combine as many different factors as possible. You take as many different influences and as many different inspirations as you can, and then you throw them into your pot and you mix them up, and what comes out is what is all the things that you love the most. And the more influences that you have, the more factors that you have, the more variables that you have, the more different your variable is going to be, your result is going to be to somebody else's. I think that comes with anything artistically. Bands who will take, maybe several inspirations as opposed to bands who would take 100 different inspirations. And if even just one of those inspirations changed, one of those variables changed, then you would have a different result at the end of it. One thing I love about Instagram is that you don't really have to search hard to find inspiration anymore. If you go onto your feed where things are being suggested to you, you might be shown 10 new drummers in the space of a minute or two, that you can watch, and you can find inspiration in what they're doing. And it can be anything. It can be from their playing, one aspect of their playing, their rhythm playing, their chops playing, how they play musically, what kind of genre they're playing to, the sounds that they're getting, whether they're playing a snare drum that you like the sound of, or they're playing, their toms have a great sound, their cymbals have a great sound. You're being able to pick and choose from all these different things that you like and that make sense to you. And, you're just holding on to them. And the more different kind of influence you get, the more unique you're going to be and the more original you're going to be as a player. So I love the fact that there is you have access these days to be able to see so many people play, because just thinking about how that used to be, like if it before the days of the internet, you had word of mouth and you were kind of relying on that a little bit, and maybe you'd see somebody if you were at a drum festival, it was a player that was playing for a particular band, and that would have been maybe only a few of the only ways that you would discover new players. Whereas these days we have all of those outlets plus social media and the internet, which is just throwing drummers your way every single day, where you can take new influence from. So, with all these different combinations of factors and all these different influences that you can have, your originality should realistically, it should just be endless. There shouldn't be as many people kind of copying each other. There should be more originality than there ever has been.
What are your view on the role and function of music as a political, social, creative task of artists today, and how do you try to meet these goals of your work?
Um, realistically, while I'm playing and while I'm making videos, I try to keep away from a lot of that stuff. I think people can find that when they want to, and for me, the world is very, very split at the moment, and especially politically and socially. I think there are a lot of things that are dividing people more than ever right now, and of course it's really important to stand up for what you believe in, and there are certain things that you should say if it means, if you feel that you should always say the things that you should, regardless of how people would view them. But for me, in what I do, as far as playing drums on a social media platform, it's like it's there to play drums, and hopefully that would be something that would unify people rather than divide people. I really don't think it's a place for me to be posting, really speaking actively and regularly or aggressively in any kind about what kind of ideals that I hold. I think it's more to be to do with a sense of unification. If something were to happen or to be said on my page, then depending on what kind of message or argument was put across, then maybe that would involve intervention. But as far as things that I instigate, it's there for I'm there for drums. I'm there for music and for people to sort of be unified by that, if at all possible. So yeah, that's kind of where that one leads to.
All right, man, that's amazing. All right, so let me ask you this, man. Listening is also an active rather than just a passive process. How do you see the role of the listener to the musical communication process?
With I guess that has a ton of different interpretations, and it really depends what's being listened to. Um, as far as what I do, as far as what I do is concerned, again, there's when you think of things in a musical context, if you think of melodic music and the way that especially whenever there is a kind of a melody, there is a tune, there's a song being created, that suggests artistry to me and emotion. And it's not to say that can't be done with drums alone. It absolutely can imply emotion and many different things with with just drums alone, but especially when people sort of come together in an ensemble or anything which really kind of, I think, creates emotion. Probably there's more opportunity to create emotion with melody than there is with with rhythm. Um, with what I do, a lot of it is educational. Um, you know, I'm doing what I do on Instagram for a lot of it is for demonstrative purposes. You know, it's for recreational purposes. You know, to take some inspiration into a practice room with them if they want to develop and get better with something. Um, you know, realistically, I'm trying to inspire people in that way more than I am to inspire them to really, really listen sort of intently to what I'm doing. You know, I think there's two different aspects to that. While I'm playing audio, you know, I'm playing music, I'm playing drums. You know, it's kind of the sum of its parts. I hope that people would, you know, not look too deeply into it, if that makes sense.
Yeah, man. All right. So, do you have a musical vision what you haven't been able to realize for technical or financial reasons, or an idea of what music itself could be beyond its current form?
Sure. Yeah, that one's a little bit easier. That one, my my aspirations as a drummer, as a musician, from the time I was young, was always uh, to be in a band. I'm a massive fan of kind of more conventional bands. You know, like particularly in the early 2000s. More kind of like rock and alternative music, but you know, with a ton of different influence. That was kind of more coming from my background. My mum was really into that kind of music, especially when it was all coming out when I was growing up, and that was what she was playing to me. My dad is, like I said, he's a bass player and had always been more into funk and jazz and fusion and things like that. So it's two kind of really different joined together to make up a lot of what my musical taste is. But predominantly, the things that I kind of gravitate towards musically are more alternative kind of genres and heavier stuff. Um, you know, on that is sort of the heavy rock side. So that had always been my plan. I always wanted to get a band together, and I come from I actually come from a town called Torquay, which is just a little bit south of Exeter, which is kind of like a holiday town, and it's interesting because there's quite a large music scene there, but it's particularly to accommodate the leisure industry. There's a lot of covers music and you know, a lot of covers bands. It's not quite as you know, well, there's a lot of people doing there's a lot of people making original music there, but there's not quite as much of a market for it, just because there are kind of more opportunities playing, you know, like the bars and the clubs and the covers scene, because that's what the audience is kind of predominantly there for and what they're looking for in that town. So I moved away, and I moved away to three different cities around the southwest, which is Bristol, Exeter, and Plymouth. And I'm in Exeter now, I guess mainly because of my job, because of where I work, and I I had continued to look for, you know, to look for bands, but again, these are kind of like they're smaller cities, and a lot of um, a lot of what has come out in this country is from around the more central country, around the more central cities like you know, London and Manchester and Birmingham have all had you know, sort of big musical movements, and it's generally the places where still people still come from, as far as bands coming out of. And I guess if I had a regret from my past 5 years, it was probably perhaps that I didn't move up to one of those cities a little bit sooner. and give myself more of a chance of immersing myself in a bigger kind of more creative scene, like a more original scene. The thing that is changing about the music industry and the networking especially is that we have the internet and we have the ability to be able to connect and to to showcase and kind of like advertise yourself on social media, which is where Instagram for me comes into things like that. And it's just another function of it. It's like, it's been a great kind of positive outlet for me over the last 7 months since the beginning of COVID, but also may inspire future opportunities if anybody were to see me playing, and that's a very like generalized statement, like it's kind of leaving a lot to chance to a certain extent, but it at least kind of gives me an opportunity to kind of demonstrate what I do, and to demonstrate my playing. It's very easy for me to go on and look for a band online or try to meet people online and kind of say, well, look, this is me and this is what I do. I never really had anything like that before. So the goal, I guess, is to take this as far as possible, with myself playing musically. However, I am massively engaged and interested with teaching, and I'm really fascinated with how people learn in particular, and if there are more effective ways for people to learn how to play the drums, really like studying the science of how that actually happens, not in a sense like what you should be doing or what's right and wrong, or how do you get, it's more how do you get from point A to point B, or even point A and further. I want to sort of study how people can get out of their own ruts, and you hear people like will say to me quite a lot like that they've hit a wall and they need some inspiration to get past their wall. I'd really like to kind of get around the point where people are running into walls at all, and be able to sort of study, be able to sort of decipher and understand a little bit more about how people learn, especially with different age groups as well. Predominantly most of my students are children, and I'm fascinated to see how they learn and how they react to learning and playing the instrument, and what they're inspired by, compared to adults and people even who are a little bit older than them. If it's just the difference between a student being an 8-year-old who's just begun playing the drums and what they love about it, and how they work, how their minds work, and how they learn, as compared to someone who's maybe only like 4 or 5 years older than them. I'm fascinated by the science of it, to be honest with you, and how people can learn in the most effective ways, and what will stop them from giving up or running into walls or anything like that. It's the kind of the mental process and the psychological process around that I would like to know more about, and that I would like to kind of study a bit more. So those two things are the real targets for me, I guess. It's how far can I take myself as an individual playing music, and also how far can I understand, can I uncover anything new, and kind of put any research and uncover anything new into the way that people learn this instrument, or any instrument for that matter in particular.
All right, man, that's dope. Okay, so let me ask you this, man. You said that it sounds like you have a very strong passion for teaching anyone how to play drums. So my next question is your classroom, is it like hands-on, or is it virtual because of the pandemic right now?
So it's a bit of both. So when I teach in schools, I teach one-to-one. So it's me and a student in a room, and there's either obviously one drum kit or two drum kits in there, depending on which school I'm teaching in. And precautions are taken, obviously, but I'm able to teach them physically as I was doing before. The third school that I teach in at the moment is the lessons are being conducted online, just because it's at the school's discretion as to whether they open up to teachers. So yeah, two of them have reopened, and one of them, the teaching is still being done online.
All right, man. So let me ask you this, man. How did this all come upon? Like teaching and getting into these schools. Like, was this something that you targeted towards, or was this something that just happened?
So I was really fortunate, to be honest with you. I I was out one night, and I'd seen a friend's band play, and I think it was another friend who was there, who was a drummer who I've known for a long time, and I kind of spoke to him. And funny enough, he had the same Roland kit as me. He asked me about something, I think maybe about how he could connect it to his computer. So I helped him out with that, and he got back to me and he said, "Oh, I'm working for your old drum teacher who taught me very briefly when I was about 11, I think, when I was in my last year of primary school." And he said, "Oh, he's looking for somebody to come and teach for him. Wants somebody to go into a few new schools." So I went to go and teach for him. And in the beginning, the work was really tough. Actually, I had to I had to drive quite a long way to another city to teach, and I wasn't teaching for very long hours. They were just kind of trying to build things up at the beginning. There were only, several students, and it's difficult if you're a teacher and you want to kind of get into it, because you always have to start somewhere, and you might only start with a few hours a week, but you need to be dedicated to it in case other things open up. So it's just like you can't take on several jobs. Like you can't just have one and then start dropping out of hours of that particular job while you have more students start to come in. You have to clear your schedule and be willing to start with just a few students and then try and build up into that. And it's it can be a little bit risky. It can be, it takes patience. You have to invest in it. It's just like anything else, like a business opportunity. You have to invest your time. So when it started, it was great to have the opportunity, but it was difficult work. It was difficult to drive for an hour and a half, to do 2 hours teaching and then like drive an hour and a half back again. And over time, it just kind of it built up. And I in fact ran into somebody else who had kind of built their own teaching business already, and they were moving away. They were moving to Spain with their family, and they needed a teacher to take over some of their business. So I took on about 3 days work with them, and then built up the last 2 days over the next year. So from something that started as, I don't know, I think I was working maybe 8 or 9 hours a week over like 3 days, and having to drive about 8 or 9 hours as well over that week. And yeah, eventually got to the point where I was working about maybe 32 hours, I guess, with all the other students that I built up privately as well. So yeah, when you do that as a teacher and you're on those kind of hours, like it mounts up. And it was, it was really cool to go from not a lot of hours and kind of taking a risk on it to being full up very quickly. But as much as there was hard work done on my part, there was also a lot of luck involved, and sometimes you just can't answer for that. Like if you get lucky, you get lucky, and you have to hold on to the work. You got to do things professionally, and you've got to try and be the best teacher that you can be, and keep everybody engaged. But yeah, I was still very fortunate.
All right, man. All right. So, let me ask you this, man. For any listener out there that's probably hearing your story and everything, is there any way that they could maybe sign up for any like online classes you might have, maybe?
Sure. Well, I try to be really responsive to all of my DMs on Instagram. I'm always willing to talk to anybody about any of this stuff, really. And I don't, I at the moment I'm still kind of really new to all of this. I don't want to sort of like preach from the top as if I really know what I'm doing, because I'm just starting to get interested in some of the really really kind of in some of the really kind of more involved and in-depth thoughts about teaching, not just as if like what I'm teaching people, but how I'm teaching it, and how people learn in their most kind of effective ways, and what techniques there are to be able to help people to learn in the most effective way. um I'm more than happy to share kind of what I find and what I think with anybody at any time. If people would like to learn with me as a drummer, then I'm available for Zoom lessons. Again, that can be all arranged through direct messages on Instagram, um, which is at Mitch.plays.drums, unless we're not stating that in the interview. We haven't done yet. But that's my Instagram. And yeah, I'm more than willing to help anybody with anything they need. I'm trying at the moment to sort of be someone who can hopefully show people some more advanced techniques without having to look to price to people like in the industry where their prices may be a little bit out of reach. I always try my hardest with whatever I do as well, not to teach things that I don't know about. I think that's really important for any teacher, is to always kind of admit what the limitations of your current state of teaching are. And it's not a nice thing to do to a certain extent, because if you do it too much, you kind of realize that, if there's so much that you don't learn, then maybe you need to go back to the drawing board. Like, there should definitely be, more things that you know than you shouldn't. But having said that, I kind of leave a lot of I leave a lot of things that are really kind of not science and open to debate to people who know more about it than I would. And that kind of comes down to I think that kind of comes down to a lot of things that are to do with technique. There's a lot of people who can tell you there's like 100 different ways to hold a drumstick on Instagram, and it's like, who's going to listen to who and who knows the most, and that's the sort of stuff that I don't really like to get into. I know who I listen to, and as far as that kind of stuff is concerned, like, there's one guy who seems to be doing it better than anybody else, and that's a drummer called Dave Elitch. And he's the guy who I think has really looked into this kind of stuff, and knows what he's talking about more than anybody else, particularly because I've tried and tested it, and it's made a huge difference to me. So as far as that stuff is concerned, and anything that I'm really not knowledgeable about, to a to a standard where I don't think that it's teachable. Like, I don't go into that kind of stuff, because I think it's dangerous. It's the sort of point where you start telling people what you don't know about, and I think that's quite a pernicious thing in a sense. But as far as what I do, if anybody sees me and specifically wants to know what I do, then that's what I can teach people. That's what I want to teach people. And I guess there are some things that I can do, and that I kind of specialize in, that are attainable with lessons with someone like myself, who's kind of not gonna price myself too far ahead, because like, it's like, who am I? I'm just a new person in this game, so yeah, that's kind of the thing that I would like to offer people at the moment.
All right, man. All right. So, let's go right here, man. What was it like performing for the first time, man?
Again, it's not really something that I can think back to. I do remember it feeling a lot different to the way that it feels now. I rarely get nervous now, I have to be honest. I get nervous in unique shows, like big shows, but even then not as nervous as I used to get. Um, I used to get so nervous that I wouldn't want to go on. And then, when I did go on, I only wanted to go back on afterwards, and it's kind of just getting those nerves out of the way as if like, what's the worst that can happen? And the way to do that really is to be prepared. The more that you can prepare yourself for a particular situation, the less that you think or, that can go wrong. And I think there's a glass ceiling of preparation as far as where people are at any one particular time. People, what one person's kind of conception of being prepared for a performance or a gig is not the same as another person's. And the place where I am now is like, I want to know that whenever I go on stage or whenever I perform, I know exactly what's going on, and I know exactly that I am, even if there are improvised stages of that gig, or there are parts where I don't know exactly what's going to happen, that I am still prepared for them. I don't want to go into any situation where I feel like the rug could be swept from beneath my feet. So it's preparation more than anything that will calm your nerves, I think. But as far as performing goes, it's a magical place to be in. Anybody who performs and who does it regularly and who really knows and has a passion for it will tell you it's a real form of escapism and expression, and it's something that's very, very addictive. It's extremely addictive, but it's addictive the more enjoyable it is, and the more enjoyment that you have is like, the more prepared you are for what you're going to do, and the more that you believe in it as well. If you really believe that you're expressing yourself in exactly the way that you want to when you're performing, and it's everything that you want to do, and you're not doing it for any other reason than the fact that the fact that you love it, then that's going to be conducive to you feeling the best about yourself when you play.
All right, man. So let me ask you this, man. Since the UK is on a pandemic lockdown, is there any live performances you might be doing on your Instagram live or your YouTube live or maybe your Facebook?
Sure, yeah. People are like getting really creative with it all the time. It's amazing. I think I think it's inspired people to think outside of the box. I love the fact that there seems to be nothing that can keep it down. It's like, if people want to be creative and if they want to continue to express themselves and provide people with art and entertainment, then they're going to find a way to do it. And I think that's great. There's been so much posted, for me as someone who's a musician, and kind of like, I would say, I don't know, maybe every 1 in 3, 1 in 4 people who I have as friends on Facebook are probably musicians of some kind. And, because of that, it's just like, there's kind of a constant stream of people who have got stuff going on, even though we're in the situation that we're in now. And it's awesome, to be honest with you. I guess someone in my situation who got inspired in a sense by the pandemic to kind of think, well, this is my opportunity to really build something and work on my own playing and work on creating a social media profile. It's been good for me, and I guess that applies to tons of other people as well who are in the same situation and wanted to develop themselves and do the same thing. That's probably happened a ton. Yeah, it's kind of the old cliche really, but it's like, your struggles will make you stronger. And I think the arts industry is, especially in this country as well, like, there's been so much going on with the government and how the government has not been entirely sympathetic to what is going on in the arts industry, and probably, you know, a little bit out of touch with how much it actually contributes and helps the economy, and you know how much it helps people's well-being, and then just their all-around quality of life. You know, there's been a lot to do with that, and I think, you know, people are really, really standing through it, especially in this country. You know, being a sort of a citizen of this country, like that's all I can speak for. You know, I don't really know exactly how it is in other countries as well, but it certainly is like that over here. You know, and if it gets through that, then it comes out stronger the other side. You know, it's certainly going to make us all appreciate it when it comes back. You know, more than we ever did, and you know, I think in many ways it's been a uniquely positive aspect of. It's been a uniquely positive thing that, you know, despite its obvious like many negatives, has had several silver linings at the same time.
All right, man. So, what makes you different from other drummers?
I think it's like I said, as far as the the combinations, like the different influences and variables that you have when you are a musician or you're doing anything creative, like the more variables and influences that you have to combine, like the more different you're going to be. And going back to the influence that my parents had on me musically, as far as, you know, how my taste developed, it's funny really, like my parents hated each other's musical tastes. Like when they come back and they say, oh, you know, I used to hate it when they play this and I hate it when they play that, and I'm kind of there going, well, I like both of those things, you know. So it's like being brought up in like a dichotomy of musical influences is like really conducive. Actually, it's kind of, I think, been a really positive thing. I, as a drummer, have a particular love, like I've said, for kind of heavier like rock music. Like that's where I stand on a lot of things. That's what I'm strongest with. That's what I like the most. But being brought up with a dad who was into jazz and funk music and fusion stuff has had a massive effect on the way that I play and the sort of stuff that I listen to and that I love to play at the same time. If anything, a lot of what comes through, I think, probably in my playing on my Instagram is that, you know, I try to blend those two things quite a lot. You know, I'm thinking in terms of a brain that plays more technically difficult or involved music, and then thinking about how I can use that in a heavier sense, like in a rock sense, like trying to combine the two. You know, my musical sort of influences and likes, like stretch it with like a massive range. There's a massive difference in dynamic in what I love. And you know, perhaps like just because of that, it's combining two things that don't normally sort of get seen to match up to each other, I guess, sometimes, you know, in the fusion stuff and the jazz stuff, and then, you know, combining that with rock. You know, people have certainly started to do that. You know, like the Mars Volta particularly, anything that they were doing was like a kind of a direct combination of those two things. But I think if anything, for what I would like to do, I would like to see, you know, maybe something like that in a little bit more of like a kind of a pop sense, like with hooks and things like that. You know, I'm a massive fan of I'm a massive fan of like Radiohead, for example, like Radiohead and early '90s stuff. I love Jeff Buckley and some of the playing Matt Johnson's playing on that album, which is really, you know, really dynamic, really dynamic. It's such a dynamic album anyway, but like how, you know, there were incredibly heavy and intense moments on that album, and, you know, like rock kind of elements and, you know, at the same time, very sensitive and soft moments. And, a lot of things that are in between that as well. And I think those bands and those influences that I like mix those two things. The things that I get drawn to is like mixing them, wherever there's a massive dynamic in the band. Even as far back as like Zeppelin, for example, there was a massive dynamic change, the range in what Zeppelin were doing. So yeah, things like that. I don't want to put myself in one genre these days. Those are the things that I like, but hopefully that's what's different in my playing. It's certainly what I try to put across anyway.
All right, man. All right. So in 2017 seems like one of the years that you broke into the music. So let me ask you this. What was it like being one of three winners of the European contest held by Roland?
It was really cool. It was cool. It was a good little competition. And it was only posting a solo on Instagram, but it was an awesome opportunity for me to write something and construct something and give myself a challenge, and be able to push myself as far as it was something that I really wanted to do well in. It was something that I really wanted to win, and it was a really good opportunity for me to have some incentive to push myself, and especially since I've always been a massive perfectionist in everything that I do, and sometimes that can be a bit of a hindrance, to be honest with you, because it gets to the point where you get so self-conscious about everything being perfect all the time that you end up not doing anything at all. And that's kind of where things ended up for me before I really started getting onto Instagram and like trying to force myself to post things like every day or every other day that would be good enough for people to see, because otherwise you record something and you just go, oh, that's not good enough and that wasn't perfect, and my technique drops out here and this is no good and all that kind of stuff. And the more that I'm doing it, the better I get anyway, because the red light pressure is off, from knowing that you're recording yourself and that you have to do something. So you get better at managing that anyway. But the more okay you are with kind of realizing where you are at a particular time. So the competition was great for that, because it was me recording something and being happy with it enough to be able to put it out into the world, and then getting some recognition for that as well. It was like, well, here's the first time I did this, and the first time that I did it, you win a contest and somebody gives you $2,000 worth of equipment. It's like there could be a bit of a trend in this, like maybe you should keep posting videos. So that was really helpful to me, to be honest with you, and it put me in touch with someone who works with Roland, who has been really, really supportive of everything that I've done so far, and who helped me with my endorsement. So yeah, it was really good to do, and I enjoyed doing it as well.
All right, man, that's amazing. So in 2019, you played with 20 plus different musical acts, ranging in genres from rock, metal, jazz, and pop. Let me ask you this. What was it like being in the same room and the same headline as these other acts while performing?
As in, as in, as in other people like would be there, other bands would be there at the same time, or
Yes, yes. How was it like being able to be around these musical acts as you coming up as a drummer and being able to communicate with these people?
so just with all the different bands, like how that would work when you go into a situation with new people.
Yeah.
Sure. So it's always a new experience, because generally at these gigs you'll be at a new place. I mean, around here, around here, there are certain, obviously there are venues that you would play quite a lot at, so you can sometimes like go to venues and play venues that you've played at before, but um, you know, a lot of what gets done as far as when you're a session music, or when you're a freelance musician, session musicians has always been more for recording for me, which I don't really do a lot of. Um, but as far as being like a freelance musician who just jumps on and sort of, a lot of what I do is through agencies. So agencies will put bands of musicians together and give you a set list, and you have to play the set list. And I think it kind of highlighted to me like how reliable you should be if you are a freelance musician. If anything, you should be the person that everybody else relies on. And for that reason, it's because if you can be that person, and if you can be that security in the acts that you're playing in, then people are going to want to hire you more. If they realize that for example, if you know the songs, if you not only play them well and you play your parts well, but if you can be a leader, if you can be the person in the band who's kind of really up on the structures, particularly, like that's something that I think that people miss out on sometimes as they're learning tracks, and that they kind of neglect, is like, oh, I know how to play the parts, but it's like, well, what order do you play these parts in? Do you know how many bars there are in this chorus, and like where you go to the bridge at the right point? You know what order all of these songs are in. So that's the thing that I try to focus on the most, because I think it's the thing that people are the most uncertain about when they come into gigs. So in an ideal world, the better you get, like the better you get, and the higher up that you get, and the better gigs that you do, the more likely you're going to be to play with musicians who play like this. But in any situation, you should always, it comes back to that thing of preparation. Like when you're performing, you should always be as prepared as you possibly can be, which just means putting in the work and kind of respecting the songs that you're going to play, and knowing what the structures are, and how you play with people. The more reliable you can be, and the more you are someone that other people want to play with, the better you are going to do as a freelance musician. If you can make it about other people, and if you can be selfless in your playing, and it's just like I play lots of chops, like in my spare time in my practice room, and it's fun, but you're thinking of practical applications for them, and being like, maybe this isn't the best time to bust out some 30-second note crazy lick like right here. Like that's not going to be what people need right now. So it's being as reliable as you can as a musician, and making the band sound as good as possible with what you're doing. Really putting your priorities into order when you're playing, and thinking, it's like the song first, like play for the song, play the groove, make sure everybody else knows what they're doing, like tell people when the chorus is going to be, tell people when the bridge is going to be, if there's a stop, like how are we going to end, all that kind of stuff. And the more you do that, the more comfortable and the more experienced you get with it, and you realize that that's kind of what people are looking for when they play with somebody. So they're looking for somebody to just be reliable. So that's kind of that's the take home of all of this stuff. It's like, play authentically, play the style of the music that you need to play, and do it as authentically and as traditionally as you can. And you have to get to know different people as well. Like some bands will want you to do the crazy stuff, and some bands won't. And you should always start being conservative, and then if people say to you, yeah, you should like express yourself more, or sometimes you got to feel that. You got to feel whether somebody's saying, yeah, you can go crazy, you can play some more chops here, or we want this to be a little bit more solid and a little bit more like sensible. And I haven't always gotten that right, to be honest with you, but the more you play with people, the more you learn what you should be playing at any one point, and it differs from gig to gig massively. So yeah, that's what it's like playing with different people, and it's just that people are different, and everybody wants something different. But I think realistically should start doing the same thing, every time. Do the basics, do the fundamentals, and if you get any freedom on top of that, then you should perhaps have the ability to know when you're afforded that freedom.
All right, man. All right. So let me ask you this, man. What is the best advice you've been given, and do you have any advice for any upcoming bands in your local area?
Best advice. It's a tough one, really. Nothing sticks out massively. Nothing sticks out massively. I don't know. I actually saw a quote the other day, which was, "If you're not winning, you're learning," and that's something that is like incredibly transparent across lots of things that you do when you play music, or if you're involved in this. And winning is not necessarily as far as a competitive sense, but it's just as far as progressing. It's like if you're not progressing, then you're learning, or you should be learning, because that's what we're all trying to do, really. We're all trying to progress. We're all trying to get from one stage to the next. And if you're not, then you need to take a real good look and like figure out why that isn't happening. Is there something that you're doing, or is there something that you're not doing that's kind of holding you back? As long as you're making progress and you have targets, which is so important, like targets and goals are so paramount in this. And it's like if you just kind of you have nothing to progress towards. Like you can't tell if you've made progress if you don't have something to move towards. So people should set goals, whatever you're doing. If you're a musician and you're trying to develop as a musician, or if you are a band and you're trying to get further as a band, like you need to know what quantifies progress and how you can say, well, we've got further. And it's like, did we get further because we got more followers on a platform, or did we get further because we recorded an album that we're really happy with, or we get further because we got a better reaction at this gig tonight than we did at night, or we felt better on stage when we played, or that's like a collective thing. But like a personal thing is all of those things as well. It's like, did I feel better when I played with this band last night? Do I feel better about performing? And then being specific inside that, just like, well, if you didn't feel better about what you were playing or while you're performing, like what could make that happen? Is it going to be you're going to be more secure in what you're playing? Is it being better prepared? Is it being better at one particular aspect? Like, should I work on my chops? Should I work on my groove playing? Like, did this particular band, like if they decided that they didn't want to play with you anymore, or if maybe if they do want to play with you, but what is it that is the difference there? Like, was there something that you could have done that could have helped this, that could have had this band hold on to you? I think it's really important to feel that you're only at a stage in life that you have like a glass ceiling above you at all times. You should never sort of be so stagnant to the point where you think that you're not going to learn anything new. And sometimes learning comes in like negative experiences, in the sense that if a band says, well, we would rather, if a band went and played with somebody else, you didn't get a particular gig again, or if if you didn't get, if you were struggling, if you'd hit a wall and you were like, oh, I don't know where to go next, you've got to think about like, where is the next thing? So I think, realistically, with advice, it's like, how do you get from where you are now to the place that you want to be? And if either you're progressing and you know how to progress, or if you're not progressing, then you should be learning from that. You should be thinking about what is it that you need to do, and really kind of deconstructing where you are at that point and setting yourself some kind of goal, and just being like, right, well, here's where I would be if progress is defined to me. Like, here's where I want to be, and how do I get there? Like really thinking about how you get there. So that's as much of a piece of advice as I could give, or has been sort of given to me. It's like, set goals, always set goals and know where you want to be and how you're going to get there.
All right, man. All right. So let me ask you this then. So what are your goals? What are your goals leading to 2021?
I would, if I was, so that's a good question because that kind of gives me a chance to like quantify like what that involves. So going into 2021, I would like to, well, it depends what situation we're in, to be honest with you. If like the whole COVID thing continues, then I've got to sort of reassess that and think, well, I'm not going to be able to meet some of these, like as far as live stuff is concerned. I want to be able to see all of my students progress in more effective ways. I want to become a better teacher, and to me that's quantified by having students who are progressing quicker or who seem to be enjoying what they're doing more. I want my kind of methods and my teaching to be as effective as possible. What more can I learn about how people learn? And when I say that as well, I mean, I'll give you an example. There's a kind of like there's a ratio of like failure to success. There's a failure to success ratio, which is like I would like to learn a little bit more about where that sits. So for example, if somebody's doing something and they fail at it too much, if you have like, let's say you have like 10 failures for one success. If you're learning in a particular lesson, you try to do something 10 times and you can't do it, that's probably going to frustrate somebody. It's going to get to be too much. Like it's too difficult for somebody to keep up with that. And if you only get one success for 10 failures in a particular lesson while you're trying to learn something, then that particular thing is probably too far ahead. It's not going to be good for the person. They're not going to stick around for long if they're just failing all the time. But then too much success isn't so good either, and just being able to do things first time, like that doesn't work either. It's like going back onto a video game and like starting at level 1 just because you're really good at it, and it's like you'll do that for so long and then you'll just get bored of it. And there has to be a certain level of being able to push yourself through things and get success at the end of it, and that would be like the optimum place. So things like that, especially with different age groups as well, like whether that changes and differs from when you're 7 to like a 10-year-old, a 13-year-old, a 16-year-old. Sometimes you got to think like teenagers are generally more insecure than children. Like children kind of expect to get things wrong and they want to learn, and they are expected to be told stuff as well, but there's a lot more insecurity and self kind of scrutinizing with teenagers, and they don't like to get stuff wrong as much as children do. Actually, it seems like they get frustrated a lot more quickly and they get insecure about stuff. So obviously that's going to be a massively variable thing, but that's something that I'm really interested in. So I would like to be more understanding with things like that, to be a better teacher and to really find out about the things that I don't know about, to always be able to chase things up, like to write it down. Like if there's something that I come up against when I'm playing, or if a student asks me a question, I'm not completely sure of it, like I'm going to write it down and make sure that I find out about that, so that's kind of a goal myself. Things, seem to be going quite well and going pretty steady on the social media. And, I would love to have more opportunities to work in bigger and more exciting ventures with any of the companies that I play with. I'd like to set myself up in a new sort of playing space. I'm moving in a couple of weeks, and I would like perhaps to have a more visually presentable space, to develop on that. Like it's been really good to start with what I have and to make the most of it, but I would like to develop on it. And, perhaps set up a YouTube, see about how I can monetize a little bit more about with what I do, but keeping that kind of an accessible place to people, really developing what I think is unique about what I do, so it can stand out and appeal to people. You don't just want to be another person like doing all the same things, which again, comes with that thing of monetizing. It's like, well, you can monetize all you want. It doesn't necessarily mean that people are gonna come and buy it or pay for it. So I think that's really important, is developing what makes you unique and individual, and why people are kind of subscribing to you, and being able to get the most out of that. So those are a few big things, really, things that I just want to kind of keep progressing towards. And if gigs come back and there are more opportunities to play live, then it's developing myself as a live musician. How much more reliable can I be as a player? How much better can I get and feel in a particular situation? How much more effectively can I learn songs and sets? Can I improve certain aspects of those? And develop some new techniques to be a better musician. Things like that, and then seeing where that goes. Like, do I want to be playing locally by the end of next year if everything opens up again, or would I rather be touring with somebody again? I have done a few times, but like, how can I get to a point where I'm doing that much more than I'm doing now? Because it's something that I'd like to do with the spare time that I have away from teaching. So, can I balance those two things, and can I make the most of my opportunity with a social media page that is seeing a lot of attention at the moment?
All right, man. So let me ask you this: how is your music going to evolve from here? Like, do you play any other instruments? Are you going to be developing maybe a project that you got in the works right now? And what could we expect from Mitch?
Yeah, I play guitar actually, and I've always played it. I played it. I started learning when I was 12, and I always played it with the objective of writing. It's really difficult to write melodies if you're a drummer. I'm not a very good singer, so it was like in bands, and every time I was in a band when I was a kid, and I had like some ideas, you found that none of the guys in the band could relate to my ideas because they weren't melodic. It was like I was trying to sing them riffs and they just didn't get it. So it was like I started learning guitar to try and make that easier for me. So, it's always been there, but I always kind of envisioned being part of a collective and being part of a band. And if the profile kind of helps me to be seen by more people who I could possibly collaborate with, and it helps me in any way to find a band, it's not, it's not the be all end all of it, and it's not it doesn't necessarily mean that it's going to happen just because there's an Instagram profile there, but it certainly gives it more chance of happening. That would be that would be a great thing to happen. I would love to get into something and be making original music as soon as possible. Yeah, it's definitely something that I would like to do. Again, it's just a lot of it's to do with luck. Like, it's, do you meet the right people? And you can put yourself in as many situations as you want to, but sometimes people just don't. They don't get that lucky. Like they meet people, and they meet people who they could be in a band with, but maybe those people are already in bands, and it's like they kind of have to come out of them before you want to, before you get together. Sometimes it just happens like that, and a lot of it is down to luck and fortune, and maybe it just hasn't happened yet. But as with everything in my power, I'm going to keep trying to do to be able to meet the right people and to get into the right band, and that will be the point when I start making original music and really really coming out with that. I'm into a lot of different things at the moment, though. Like the conventional band of, like, the whole kind of conventional alternative band is like not the only thing that I would be prepared to do, I don't know why, but I have a massive love for lo-fi music at the moment, like lo-fi kind of ambient electronic music with drums in the background. So I could really see myself getting into that at some point. So, you know, maybe that happens. Maybe there's anybody who would send me stuff to play over, that I would love to do that. But yeah, it's all kind of in the pipeline. I'm going to put myself into these situations as much as I can, put myself out there, and you know, if it comes together, then it comes together. But if it doesn't, then you know, going to still kind of find happiness in what I'm doing right now, which you know I am doing. I enjoy what I do, and I enjoy playing. So it's cool for right now.
All right, man, that's great. All right, so, man, is there anything that you want to speak on that I didn't touch on?
So I had a question from a follower of mine. I'll try to touch on it really really quickly. So it's it's from my it's from my friend Ollie actually, and he said, find his message. So do you have a daily routine for your practice, and what is your ratio of practice versus playing what you like playing? Which is a great question. So as far as a daily routine for practice, I usually get about an hour in a day. I try to find an hour in a day to be able to play. So the routine is different depending on how well you respond to breaking down what you're not good at. Because if you spend too long playing the things that you are good at, then you don't get anywhere. And if you spend too long playing only the things that you're not good at and just like deconstructing your playing all the time and just being really hard on yourself, then you know that can be really testing mentally. So I always go into practice sessions, like I said, with an objective, and a little bit of brain science really quickly. There is the part of your brain that regulates positive emotion, and the chemical dopamine is called the hypothalamus. So hypothalamus is like stimulates things. When you are excited, it's kind of like the thing that rewards you for being excited by something. So it's the thing that gets stimulated with lots of addictive stuff like substances and gambling and sex and things like that. But it also releases dopamine when it realizes that you have a target and you are getting closer to that target. If you've got a goal and you're getting closer to the goal and you realize that, then you get dopamine, you get positive emotion. So when you go into a practice session, this is again this concept of having goals. It's really important, because if you don't have anywhere to go, you don't know where you're going to, then you can't regulate your positive emotion because you don't know whether you've moved any closer to it. So if you have a discernible place to go to, then you'll be more likely, when you realize that you're moving closer to it, to get positive reinforcement. So you know, the more precisely you can set out your goals in your practice session, the more likely you are to feel good about it. So you know, it depends how tough you can be on yourself, you know, as opposed to like how much you can spend playing things that you're kind of good at, and you going, yeah, you know, I sound pretty good, like I want to be a good drummer, and I want to have fun playing the things that I'm good at, and then you'll get some kind of kick out of that. But realistically, it's when you develop, it's when you kind of have something that you say, right, today, by the time I come out of this practice session, I would like to be a little bit closer to doing this overarching goal of maybe like, I don't know, speeds, or you know, I want to be good at chops. Like that's really, you know, I want to improve my chops. Like that's a really non-specific goal, you know. But if you go in and you say, right, I have this chop that I've learned, and then like the next 5 minutes, I want to, you know, 5-10 minutes, I want to take it up to this BPM and have it still sound good. You know, if you can do that and you meet that goal within that 10 minutes, you're gonna get a shot of dopamine. you know, naturally,
Yeah.
organically, because that makes you feel better. You know, you set yourself a target, and then you got to it, and because you know that you met that goal, and it was like a really specific goal, and you met it, you're gonna, you're gonna achieve that positive emotion that you're looking for. So the more that you do that during practice sessions, the better you're going to feel about yourself, because you're just like, you're getting all this positive emotion. So you have to set yourself manageable goals as well, and that's entirely subjective. So you know if you sort of come in and you go, right, I've just learnt a paradiddle today, I want to be able to play them at like 200 BPM by the end of the week, like that's probably going to be a bit much. you know so if you're setting goals that are too far ahead of you, then if you're not reaching them like immediately, then that's going to be no good for you. So you're going to have like small term, long term, mid-term goals, things that you can achieve in a particular session, things that you can work towards maybe by the end of the week or by the end of the 2 weeks, and that gives you, probably comparatively a bigger shot of dopamine and positive emotion, because it was a bigger goal that you've worked up to and that you've achieved. It's like all the other bits are checkpoints, and then you get like this big goal. And then your overarching like long-term goal of just being like a better drummer and a better musician or a better teacher, you're working closer to that as well. So yeah, it's like construct things as much as you can in terms of targets and checkpoints, because then it's a really discernible way to be able to keep track of your forward progress. And when you can see how far you've come from where you were before, that's the sort of thing that will actually physically make you feel good about yourself, because you're getting dopaminergic reactions from it. So yeah, that's a massive thing. Never practice for time, ever. Don't go in and be like, I'm going to practice for an hour today. Like, I will practice for an hour because it's the time that I can find within a day, besides all the other stuff that I have to do. Sometimes I don't get to practice for an hour. Like, I just have to deal with that. But if it's all possible, I'll try and squeeze it in. But in that time, I'm not like, the goal isn't practice for an hour. Like, that's just the time that I have to go and practice. The goal is whatever I set myself within that practice session. I'm going to get this cleaner today. I'm going to get this faster. I'm going to be more confident with this. I'm going to do this page of this book. I'm going to do, that kind of stuff, like discernible targets, really specific targets. And the better that you are with working through things like that, the more positive emotion that you will get.
All right, man. You got any special shout outs you want to give?
Shout outs. I don't know really. I don't know, any of my favorite local drummers, I guess. My boys, Matt Epps, Jack Toy, Ollie, who asked the question. Oh man, who else is with me? Who else is here? Joe Harris, Joe Sansom, all of those dudes, all of the local guys that I play drums with, and who are always in touch and keep the scene going. All those guys, and yeah, man. Anybody who listens, thanks very, very much. If you could listen to me talking for an hour and a half, then good for you. You did it. But yeah, man. Yeah, it's been really fun. Thanks for having me.
All right, man. Go ahead and plug in all your social media outlets, and then let the audience know whatever else you want to let them know, man.
Okay, dude. So the Instagram is @mitch.plays.drums. I also have a Facebook page under the same username. And yeah, please keep up with it for just little things that you can work on every day, as well as being able to interact with myself. If there's any questions that you have, I try to be as responsive as possible to all my direct messages. So please never hesitate to get in touch with me. Yeah, I just want to meet as many people as possible. That's all what I'm about, really. So yeah, that's it.
All right, ladies and gentlemen, there you go, Mitch. This is strictly for the music podcast, and we're gone.